Hello, everyone. It's Tom Double Carl, and welcome back to Politics in Perspective. Hope to have an interesting show for you this week. I think we do. We're going to start off with my opening statement. It's that time of year where the primaries are picking winners, and a lot of things coming into focus, especially on the Democrat side. Our difference maker is Andrea Kaye, an early proponent of President Trump. I want to talk with her about the state of Trump and the state of MAGA. And in our roundup, California's warning for America. A lot of things going on in California. Will that be what the Democrats do next? Or so goes California, so goes the nation. We're going to have to see. But let's start out with my opening statement, if you will. So, the Democrats are still moving left. Remember, there was all this discussion that about the Democrats, the autopsy came out. They're going to moderate, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. But as I wrote a while back, the Democrats who they are, the left portion of their party wants them to go further left, a huge percentage of that. And it's those people that are nominating the Democrats who will be facing off this fall in the midterms. So their choice of candidates tells you who they are as a party, not who the pundits say, not who the DNC says, not their press releases, but who they nominate tells you who they are as a party. And of course, there is this class division over affordability. They're more about class division. They're not about affordability. So let's look at some of their candidates. And my producer says there are some creepy faces here. There are. Look at them. On the right and on the top left, you have two Senate candidates. Now, you hear a lot of talk about the Senate is up a battleground this time around. I don't think the Republicans are going to lose the Senate, especially when the Democrats nominate these two. On the right is Graham Plattner, and in the upper left is this Senator Tallarico. Now, Plattner is running in Maine. If the Democrats are to take the Senate, Maine might be one of the states they would need to take. They're running against Susan Collins, who is a moderate, who, in the classic sense, fits the state. Her views. Maine is not far right, it's not far left. It's not California, it's not Alabama, it's in between. And Susan Collins, for years, has been elected as a Republican from that state. But our challenger this time around is the one and only Graham Plattner, who is a bit of a wacko. I picked this particular picture because that is a symbol that would be used by Nazis. And he, of course, is saying, well, he didn't realize it at the time, and he's going to take it off. Okay. But if that was his only crazy view, maybe. There's no way that a Republican could ever run for office with a Nazi symbol. Remember, they tried to take down the defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, because he had a religious Catholic symbol. The Democrats here nominate someone wearing a Nazi symbol. But we also saw that he attacks vets and he has radical views. That's who the Democrats are. They had a chance to nominate a moderate in this race, but they went with the far left because the way it works is the base, the active base, the far left nominates their people in most cases. That's him. Now we go to Texas. The Democrats, this is their white whale. This is the state they want to take with some statewide race and claim that they've broken the back of red state dominance in the South, and Texas would be that broken back. So here we have Senator Tallarico, who is, let's face it, he's a child. He has childlike thoughts. He has radical left thoughts. He's not a serious person. Here's a guy, of course, who said there are six genders, although now he's walking it back, saying he was just being provocative. Really? That's provocative, saying there are six genders? That's where you want to engage people? He also said, of course, that God is non-binary. Now, he is the height of what I call the self-proclaimed religious people who make up their own religion, right? I don't know of anyone else that says God's non-binary. I know that the Apostle John uh, in his Gospels said, Christ said, "No one goes to the Father except through me." The Father. Oh, well, pretty sure Father is a man. But in today's Democrat Party, you don't know. So they nominate Tallarico, who's a nut, saying that God is non-binary. But how do they win with someone like this in Texas? He's also a vegan. He has spoken against meat. I mean, we're not talking California. We're not talking, I don't know where. You're talking Texas and barbecues and a way of life, a culture. So is a person who says God's non-binary. Now, this all came into focus, of course, because of the huge upset in the minds of the establishment. Paxton winning almost 2-1 over John Cornyn. That should be a wake-up call to them. The failure to pass the SAVE Act will not be looked upon favorably in history. But because of that, now we have this one-on-one with Tallarico. And that's who he is. Now, on the bottom, I have two other Democrats who are nominated. One on the left, of course, is Newsom, or he's seeking the nomination, and the one on the right is Karen Bass, who Newsom endorsed for the mayor of LA. She's an abject failure. About a year ago, I think, I wrote a piece in Fox saying that Bass, Johnson in Chicago, and Mandami would define the Democrat Party in this election. What do I mean by that? Well, they're failures already, right? Mandami already, she's been there a while now, and she's incompetent. She has no business running a sophisticated bureaucracy. She has no skills at management. And when you match that with the craziness of her policies, that's what you get. You get a city in crisis. But that's who the Democrats nominated for re-election. Results don't matter. Virtue signaling does. And of course, Gavin Newsom is seeking the presidency with as bad a record running a state as you can imagine. He too has no management skills. His policies are far left, which have been enacted, and they have failed. So when you hear the Democrats claim that they want to talk about affordability or being moderate, it's who they nominate that matters. Speaking of which, let's go on a little bit here. The next slide will show you what Plattner thinks about the party. People looking for radical change. That's their nominee. That's who Elizabeth Warren said, he's my kind of man. He is. He's their kind of man. And the Washington Examiner headline, they reject the anti-woke rebrand. Remember, some in the party leadership saying, oh, we're going to change a little bit here in favor of the fight for progressive ideals. So let's take the next slide, and you get to an interesting poll, a national poll of Democrats on who they want for the presidency. Now, not that long ago, you can see Gavin Newsom was in the lead, and you had Kamala Harris up there a bit. Newsom may have peaked too early. I've said this before. In fact, I said it months ago. So who's in the lead now? Because Newsom, you can see in the far right column, has now fallen 13 points. And Pete Buttigieg is leading the way AOC's up there. Josh Shapiro, arguably less radical. Kamala Harris, and the undecided Bashir of Kentucky. But now Pete Buttigieg, whose father was a communist. Remember, Kamala Harris's father was a communist. Remember, Barack Obama's father was a communist. Remember, the Democrat platform is about socialism, but Pete Buttigieg is far left. Here's a guy who said freeways are racist. Here's a guy who said that, who, by the way, whose last election where he got votes was 8,600 votes. And there he is, a radical leftist. So once again, this is proving my point that it's the candidates they put forth that define the party, not the pundits and not the media. And that's where the Democrats are today. That is their party. They might win the midterms because it's the first midterm after the presidency. But if they do, they'll go too far and you'll wind up with a Republican president. And because of redistricting, a much heavier House lead than there is today. Always listen to people when they tell you who they are. And their candidates are telling everyone who the Democrats are. That's my opening statement. Please join me on Substack, Instagram. PoliticalVanguard.com has the history of all these podcasts, the complete list. You can check that out. And I want to thank Ex America News, AUN TV, and WorldviewTube.com for carrying us, of course, YouTube and Rumble. And we'll be right back with my difference maker interview with Andrea Kaye. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to Politics in Perspective. I hope you enjoyed that segment. I really want to reinforce the fact that when someone, including political candidates, tell you who they are, when they nominate people like Tallarico and Plattner, they're telling you who they are. And please, please, please believe them. Someone else who tells it like it is, or at least isn't very shy, is my friend, the one and only Andrea Kaye. She has a great show out of Southern California. How are you?
I'm awesome.
I think I've known you, I don't know, 15 years,
Oh
about that?
gosh, is it? No, more like 10. I think I first met you when you were running against Kamala
Kamala.
Harris out here
Wow,
for
there you go.
Senate. And that still remains just such a great story to tell my listeners about you when you come on the show is, just how you long before she sputtered and stuttered and couldn't conjugate a verb, she was dismantled on live TV by Tom Del Beccaro.
There you go. All right, so you have a great radio show. Why don't you tell people a little bit about that, and then we'll just jump into the interview.
All right, great. Yeah. Oh gosh, radio wasn't my first love. I just kind of fell into radio because I love politics, and I ended up in radio from a business career, co-hosting and producing business radio shows. But I had always been obsessed with politics, and at some point, somebody said, "Well, why aren't you doing a political show?" And so then the Andrea Kaye Show was born, and so I'm honored to be on Salem Media because, as you well know, Tom, I like to speak my truth, as the kids say, and Salem there's never been a time where they ever told me to pull back, to tell me that I can't say a certain thing or hold a certain opinion. And so it's become such a community of family and friends. And so you can listen every night. I'm on 6 to 8 p.m. here in San Diego on AM 1170 and FM 96.1. But you can download the podcast anywhere where you get your pods. And apparently, I'm starting to get lots of downloads in Venezuela.
Wow. There you go. That's cool. Awesome. All right. So you have been an outspoken critic for the Republicans' lack of fortitude,
Yeah.
spine. What tell us how you became a conservative and how you came to Trump, because you were an early supporter of Trump as well.
Yeah. I came out of the womb conservative, the daughter of two Marines. I think it Churchill who said, if you're not a Democrat when you're young, you have no heart, not a conservative when you're older, you have no brain. I could never understand liberalism. It never made sense to me. And I became obsessed with politics when Iran held Americans hostage for 444 days.
What were you, 2 years old in
I was pretty
Louisiana?
young. And I can remember talking to my dad every night, the Marine. I'd be like, Daddy, I don't understand. Why are we not taking this man out? Why have we not put a bullet between the eyes of the Ayatollah Khomeini? I didn't even understand it. So I ended up at LSU at 17 as a political science major. One of the first things they did was hand me the Communist Manifesto. I still have my copy of it with my dopey little notes in the margins. It sits on my nightstand with my Bible. And I have known since then that the Democrats had a plan to partner with the Islamists to take us over from within. I kid you not, since I was 17. And that has been the point of view that has led my politics personally, and then into, my radio show. And so for me, one of the things I tell my listeners is I don't advocate for party or Paul. I advocate for ideas. I advocate for this country. And that means I'm an equal opportunity criticizer. And I lost a lot of people during Trump's first administration because I was critical of him. When he out the gate, he goes along with Paul Ryan with the omnibus. So I just call balls and strikes. And I'm about biting. I'm not into barking, Tom Dell. I want action. Okay. The motto in my family is literally talking about it ain't getting it done. Okay. You got to make it happen.
So your bite is worse than your bark is what
Always.
You're telling it.
I've got the jaws of a pit bull.
All right. You have a special love, though, at least it appears to me, or a special interest in our judicial system and attorneys general. So I was a lawyer. You were at LSU and poli sci. Have at it. You were disappointed in bar. You'd always bring me on and say, "Well, is this going to result in something?"
Yeah.
Not like the esoteric discussion of it.
Results. Yeah. Well, yeah, because, and for me, when I was a kid and when I was thinking about politics, one of my dreams at one point was to be an attorney.
I'm so glad
I know, right? I was actually a political science major in pre-law, and my plan ultimately was to be a prosecutor and then work my way up to be a Supreme Court justice. So, so the underpinning for me and everything related to my political point of view is the rule of law. It is the U.S. Constitution. And so that has been the underwire bra, so to speak, that I view as holding up the freedoms and the values and the entire system that has been the greatest country in the history of the world. And I talked about in 2016, I talked about how the Democrat Party was amassing too much power over into the Department of Justice and these lower court judges and what was happening at the Supreme Court and how that was just a rubber stamp. I was speaking out against Roe v. Wade, that it was bad law for many years. So then you fast forward on that, and then you could see, after Trump came down the escalators, you could see that's when, long before Jan 6, long before E. Jean Carroll, any of that, we could see the beginnings of the weaponization of the government through the Department of Justice, the intelligence communities, and the FBI. And so that, and I was screaming, I wanted Trump to fire James Comey day one. I was upset that he picked Sessions as AG. The second he said in the nomination hearings, I'm hurt that y'all think I'm a racist. I've been friends with y'all a long time. I was like, oh my, then he recused himself. And I was screaming the entire Trump first term that he was just sat back with the Republican Party, allowing him and the entire agenda to be completely railroaded through a weaponized Department of Justice. And it's only gotten worse from there with the Russian collusion hoax. Every Republican knew that there was never any evidence. Oh, we got to let the investigation play out because they didn't want Trump. The most important words from the Trump at his inauguration was, "Today's the day I return the government back to the people." And that's what the Uniparty has been trying to block. And they've done it through the courts. And it's because, well, who can speak out? We believe so much in our rule of law in this country. We trust our judicial system. It is what separates us from the animals around the rest of the world. And if they could corrupt it and use it against us, then they could transform this country. Then they make us think we've got elections when we really don't. Because through the Department of Justice and through the FBI and the IC, then they can control the outcome of elections. And we've seen that play out. And I said in early 2017, don't sleep on this Michael Flynn story, because if they could do what they did to Michael Flynn, they can and they will do it to all the rest of us. And then we saw it done to Manafort. We saw it done to Roger Stone. We even saw it done to that dopey Michael Cohen with his taxi cab business. We then saw it through the Ukrainian whistleblower and all the way through Jan 6. And then we saw it with Fani Willis, Trump again, and 18 co-defendants. One of those attorneys that was indicted in Georgia, I don't have to tell you this, Tom, I know that you know, was one of the attorneys for Al Gore in Bush v. Gore in 2000. He wasn't jailed. He wasn't indicted. Well, none of them were jailed in Georgia. He wasn't indicted in 2000 for doing the same legal play that he was trying to do for Trump. And yet still to this day, Fani Willis has her law license, right? Nobody is accountable. So you can stop me at any point. I realize
No, that's good. It's passionate. And I must admit, I never thought of the Constitution and an underwire bra in the same process, but here we are. I'm still reeling from that analogy. Okay, so what is the best of Trump in your mind? What in the last 15 years, because that's how long he's been on the stage, what do you like most? And I think you just described what you like least, is that he has allowed too much of the establishment to hang around.
Well, yeah, they're not just the establishment. Trump is a deal maker. He's transactional. He likes, and I come from the corporate world. Like, I worked at corporations like Xerox. I did corporate sales for 20 years. And I understand the idea of being a deal maker.
No one's believing you did all these things in your short life span, but go on.
I did. And one of the things that I know well is the mindset of business people. You want to get the contract signed. The high that you get from that is just so amazing. And that's what drives Trump, is he's transactional. And bringing that business approach is really smart in many ways, but it can also be the Achilles heel. And I see that a little bit with the Iran situation. And my point being is that he's used to bringing all kinds of people to the table. And I think that he mistakenly thought that he could do that first go round with the rhinos like Paul Ryan, and his circle around him that he thought he could trust were the wrong people, whether it was his chief of staff or whether it was Javanka, who did not share. Jared and Ivanka never shared the MAGA agenda, didn't really understand it. So he's got the wrong people advising him. What I love about Trump is that he is fearless. I mean, just what they did him in the first year in 2017 would have resulted in most Republicans in a corner chewing on their toenails. This man was like, I ain't going anywhere. I ain't going. That man who stood up in the field in Butler with blood dripping down, screaming, fight, 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 is the Trump we love. His Achilles heel, though, is picking the wrong people. We saw it with Jeff Sessions. I warned about Bill Barr. And now we have it again with Pam. We had it with Pam Blondie, and then it took him a year and a half to get rid of her. That is his Achilles heel.
That he can be, yeah. Look, it's hard to if you look. I've said on your show many times that we've reached the age where government is trying to protect itself from us. And the CIA is trying to, you're kind enough to bring up my article about the CIA and DOJ trying to decide who can be president. So it's a tall task for him to fight all of this at once. I think in the first time around, he got there and it was too much for him to take
Mhm.
in how much he had to get rid of once he hit the ground. The second time, the break, I think, actually helped with that. I don't want to forget, you are from Louisiana, right?
Mhm.
And my favorite U.S. senator is from Louisiana. What are your thoughts on Senator Kennedy out of Louisiana?
Well, I don't love the fact that he went to Vandy. He went to Vanderbilt instead of LSU. So that's a chink against my man Kennedy. I love that he's quick with a quip. He's got that Southern sense of humor that I love so much. But from a policy standpoint, he's squishy. And you're going to get that in a state like Louisiana that for so many years was, and decades, well, since its inception, was run by Democrats. So it's going to take a transition, whether we're talking about Louisiana, we're talking about Alabama, Mississippi, and beyond, where, the Republicans, while they're called red states, they're really, they're more of like the Democrats of the JFK era. Really, if you look at both parties, the Democrats are full on communists. They're not even hiding it anymore. And today's Republican is really a Democrat. And I think that's Kennedy.
All right, but I do enjoy his sense of humor. Let me ask you this: you interact with constantly with MAGA supporters.
Mhm.
I am asked all the time, you hear all the time, and I'm asked all the time, oh, MAGA, this happened, and therefore MAGA's dead. Uh, Somebody's no longer in the fold, uh, Marjorie Taylor Greene, therefore MAGA's dead. What do you say? Where is the heart of MAGA today as it relates to the president and have it? I know it's not dead in your mind or mine, but where are you on all of that?
Well, I think I'll answer that by saying my belief is coming through my listeners of the show, and I think it's reflective in recent elections. Is that I've said from the beginning, MAGA is a movement, not a man. And he might have given it the acronym, he might have given it the label America First, but it was really the policy movement that Americans had been desperate for. In 2014, it was Democrats that, well, we had the Tea Party back in 2010 that took over the House. And then in 2014, what we saw happen was we saw Democrats and independents joining with Republicans because the Republicans were using the excuse. This is a long-winded answer, but I'll get there. The
No, don't
Republicans,
take your time.
yeah, the Republicans were using the excuse of after the Tea Party, well, we can't get anything through because we need the Senate. And we know 2012 was a disaster with Mitt Romney. So then in 2014, Democrats and independents joined with Republicans to give the both houses then at that point to the Republicans. Then their excuse was, we got to have the White House. Okay, because they said because Barack Hussein Obama will just veto everything. So then the voters were like, okay, we'll hold our nose and reelect some of you creeps. We'll give you another shot here, but we want to bring an outsider in who came down the escalators in 2015. And what that says is long before he ever said, and I picked him to be the winner after the first debate in which there was so many, I think there was 15 or 16 of them. They had divided up into two parts in the debates. I picked Trump. I really wanted a Trump Cruz ticket, but Cruz's ego was too big for it. But the point in all of that is if you look at what was going on with the voters, that was the MAGA movement. And what was it about? It was about taxed enough already. It was about the open border and an orchestrated invasion that was going on, even though, and conservatives need to stop calling Barack Obama the deporter in chief. He orchestrated invasion, put kids in cages, and called them unaccompanied children. And it was also about Obamacare because the American people could see the takeover and the grab of our insurance. And when the reality of Obamacare set in, the voters were like, wait, I thought you said our premiums were going to be the cost of our cell phone bill, right? Well, what the voters were desperate for and Trump gave voice to was this MAGA movement. But the movement is not about him. The movement is about the voters in Indiana recently who voted in all the primary challengers at the state level because they wouldn't go along with redistricting, right? It's the people down in Texas that even though John Cornyn spent $150 million, the Republican Party did spent $150 million. Ken Paxton with $15 million wiped him out in a landslide. Same thing with Massey. Same thing with Cassidy in Louisiana. The MAGA movement is about ideas. And the idea is that we restore America to the constitutional principles and the Judeo Christian values on which this country was founded. And it wasn't open borders, it wasn't $37 trillion of debt with 500 billion of it every year of our deficit being squandered by Somalis. It wasn't about boys and girls sports and mutilations of children. And the voters are still very, very clear. And they want, and then beyond that, they want action. They want action behind it. And the MAGA has been wanting to get rid of Pam Bondi because there's many people like me. The only reason why I backed Trump the second time around was because the deep state and routing it out and ending the weaponization was my number one priority. Because if you don't deal with that, the country's toast. And then Trump is just a blink of an eye on the road to tyranny.
All right, yeah, I agree with you. If you republics die in many ways, but certainly the corruption of the election process is a big deal, because if you can claim you just because people voted doesn't mean it was a legit election, as we saw in 16 and 20, and in California today. This notion that voter fraud's as old as voting. And so there's two parts to this. There's the establishment and who counts the votes, but there's also the active part of voting. All right, so how did you wind up in San Diego? You went to LSU. How'd you get to San Diego?
One of my college roommates at LSU had a brother that was stationed at North Island here. And so during summers at LSU, she would come here and visit him. And she's planned to move to San Diego after she graduated, which she did. And right after I graduated, before I started my corporate sales job, I came out here to visit her, and she took me to La Jolla Cove, and I fell in love with it. And I said, this is where I want to be. I want to live in La Jolla, and I moved here a year later. I then got hired by Xerox and went to Las Vegas for a year, which was interesting, but came back to San Diego, and I've been here ever since. And I've lived in La Jolla now for 26 years.
Yeah, there's no question that the beauty, if I used to say, if I started my legal career over again, I would have sought a job in San Diego. Okay, so we can agree that California is a beautiful place, but let's talk about California politics. And so, tell the listeners where are we in California? How bad is it? My producer Annie just got back from LA, and she said, like many people, it's much worse than the media would allow you to believe.
Well, yeah, and San Diego it's not as apparent in San Diego as it is in LA in terms of things like homelessness. And like up in LA, you've got all the fire ravaged areas. You've got Third Street Promenade that's been destroyed. You've got Hollywood that's just the Walk of Fame has been turned into nothing but an encampment. So it's not as obvious because the layout is a little bit different here. We're so spread out here in San Diego County. But the reality is San Diego County, it's more expensive to live here from an affordability standpoint than even LA. A one-bedroom apartment is $3,000 a month here. So, and so it's completely unaffordable. We have, but I don't think that the idea of California being a permanent voting class, permanent voting state is accurate anymore. And despite the fact that Democrats there's way more, I don't even know the percentage, but there's way more Democrats registered than Republicans here. Look, when you're looking at, when you're looking at the affordability crisis here, when you're looking at the impact of illegal aliens on the state in terms of hoovering up, you can't go to an emergency room here in San Diego. You're going to wait for days and days behind, I don't know how many thousands of illegal aliens. Our schools that used to be number one in the world are now at the bottom of the barrel, largely because of illegal immigration. Every metric in which California used to be number one in the world, we're at the bottom of the barrel. And that being said, voters are ready to make a change. But you've got things like in Orange County, one area alone had my friend Marley Hornick uncovered that 70,000 ghost voters were on the rolls. It is a lie that people have bought into, that it is permanent Democrat out here. If we had legit elections, I think Trump may not have won, but he would have gotten really close to it. We had back in the midterms in 2018 during Trump's first term, we went to bed thinking some Republicans had won re-election, to wake up and realize that they hadn't because of ballot harvesting. But here's some things that you may not like hearing, Tom DeBaccaro, former chairman of the Republican Party. I blame the Republican Party, particularly in San Diego County, but across the state, for the fact that this once Reagan land, once greatest state, the golden state in the world, has gone down the tubes. The Republican Party played a huge part in that. It was the Republican Party that allowed the jungle primary. It was the Republican Party that went along with ballot harvesting and making it legal, and then didn't put any boots on the ground, right? The Republican Party put in Republican mayors, like down here in San Diego, Kevin Faulconer, who stood on a beach during COVID and told people that you couldn't sit on the beach during COVID. He seized the convention center, spent $40 million to house 90 illegals, not homeless people, for COVID, and then once the money ran out, he just put them back on the street. San Diego was a solidly Republican county until the Republican Party squandered it. And there is an opportunity to take California back. The blueprint for it we can see playing out with Spencer Pratt and his brilliant campaign.
Okay, but before we get into that, going back to the Republican Party, I've said forever that they don't provide a clear choice. They don't actually connect with voters. They don't provide actual solutions. And this is getting worse. You have Republicans in the assembly who voted out procedurally to allow tax increases. There is no bright line. There is no alternative. It has become a bad deal, which is one of the reasons why I didn't do too well as well as I wanted to as chairman, because I was pretty direct on a lot of issues like you just described. And then, so what do you find? You find a place like LA, where if it wasn't for Spencer Pratt, there would be no election to follow at all, because there would have been a non-entity Republican running, and there'd be nothing for the media to follow. So you bring the right point. I say that he is demonstrating what a common sense populist, how they can succeed. So now please pick up what you were saying.
Well, he's focused on some, he's not getting sucked into national stuff. They want to bring Trump up. He's very focused on a few very key issues. And with those issues of homelessness, safety, and affordability, he is running a very detail-oriented, very fact-based, and very solution-oriented campaign, to circle back to what I was talking about earlier, which is about actions. The voters want a clear plan. They want action. If you say you're going to do something on the campaign trail, they want you to actually do it when you get into office, which is one of the things that Republicans, why there's rhino purges happening around the country. But when it comes to the issues, his details on it, which they were shocked at that debate, that he had the level of detail that he did, the one debate that went viral. And it should be studied by every Republican wanting to run for office. Ignore the consultancy class, like from San Diego, this Ron Marion guy used to run the party here. And he was the guy that ran around training all the candidates. And it's just been under the idea of move to the left, move to the left, move to the left. That's been the strategy of the Republican Party in San Diego County. I've seen it statewide, and I've seen it nationally. The idea is, instead of bright, clear, distinct choices and very clear fact-based, courageous, fearless campaigning with facts and figures, we've had Mitt Romney's showing up with a spork to a knife fight, and we've been getting crushed. So, and I want to talk a little bit about the governor's race out
Yeah,
here.
do that. We just have a couple minutes remaining, so go to the governor's race.
Okay, shoot, I could be with you all day. All right, so what's going on in the Republican governor's race is emblematic of what's the problem in the party. We've got Steve Hilton, who neither Hilton nor Bianco. If I was on a dating app, I wouldn't swipe for either of these guys. They're not my ideal dude as a candidate. But we have an opportunity to get a Republican on the ticket in the fall, but we got Chad Bianco, Mr. Ego, puff his chest out with the badge guy who refuses to drop out. We're now up the primaries next week. It's too late at this point. And now we've got we're looking at a possibility that the Republicans have squandered this incredible opportunity, and then turnout will be if it doesn't end up Hilton, we will have diminished turnout. People won't show up, and we got voter ID on the ballot. And the Republican Party should have said to Bianco, drop out, drop out, drop out.
Yes, but that's the Republican Party that doesn't hold any particular power. Look, I think that last week my opening statement was the big picture for California Republicans, which relates to the fact that a voter ID is there. The turnaround starts with that. I mean, I've told the story many times. A woman working in my office would get 5 to 6 ballots, including people that hadn't lived there in a decade. My good friend up the street, she gets 4 or 5 ballots, and that's just no way to hold an election. And so if we don't start with cleaning up the rolls and running a system which, I don't know, like Mexico, where you got to have an ID and holographic, and or the rest of the industrialized world that doesn't do mail-in and things, we can't get anywhere. So okay, so that's your conclusion. So who are you supporting for governor?
I'm supporting Hilton. I interviewed both of them at the California Republican Party convention. And when I'm interviewing candidates all running for the same position, I ask them the same question so I can differentiate. I asked both Hilton and Bianco, what is your plan when you take office for how you're going to deal with the Democrat supermajority? Hilton rattled it off. He talked about his CalDOGE. He talked about things that he could do as governor that don't require any support from anybody at the state legislature. Bianco's reaction was to get angry at me for asking the question and saying that asking him to have a plan was like a gotcha and that I was spewing Hilton talking points. Listen, if you can't give me a plan of action, what have I been saying since the beginning of our chat today? I'm into biting, I'm not into barking. Okay, you got to have a plan for me. If when you're in office, I want to see action. When you're running for office, you better be able to tell me what you're going to do and make it be very clear and very solution oriented, like Spencer Pratt's campaign. You're just coming on wanting to talk about you wearing a badge and wearing some cowboy boots is not going to sway me. It's not my look. Okay, I ain't gonna swipe right on that on a dating app, or am I gonna vote on that basis alone? Take your little mustache and hit the road, Joe.
All right. So folks, that's Andrea Kaye. She tells it to you direct. She always has. When I'm on, she's not particularly easy on me either. She wants to get to the bottom of it. We've crossed swords a couple of times, but that's good radio, and it's also it's good for democracy to have straight talk, and so she's great at that. So please tell them once again where they can find you, and then
yeah, just go to AndreaKShow.com, all the deets there, and download the podcast. And I can't believe we're out of time. I have so much fun chatting with you, Tom. I appreciate you having me.
I appreciate you coming on, and also your kindness to me over the years. Folks, that's our show. Oh, what am I talking about? I still have a segment to go. The political see, you got me all rattled. The political roundup is straight ahead. Thanks so much. Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that the State of Trump interview with Andrea Kaye. Please join her on her radio show. She's on the iHeart Network. And thanks for tuning back in. So it's our political roundup segment, and we're going to look at California again because many say so goes California, so goes the country. Well, California's given you a warning. It is, of course, in California, the party, and nationally, the party of class warfare. They're saying that the reason things are bad is because the rich are stealing from the poor. This is as old as time, as old as elected offices. The end of Greek democracy came with the equivalent of the Democrats claiming the rich were hurting the poor. The end of the Roman Republic, the rich were hurting the poor. The end of the Roman Republic, redistribute wealth. The end of Greek democracy was when the equivalent of the modern day Democrat Party took over the assembly and voted high taxes, and then it wound up with violence and the like. So this is an old thing. And in California, of course, they have on the ballot this billionaires tax. Now, this is coming into focus because the candidates who are running on the Democrat side for California governor are supportive of this billionaire tax, not Gavin Newsom per se, although I don't think he's going to be able to stop it. A new poll's out, and I thought it was an interesting poll because it sort of tells you the mindset of where Democrats are today, and I think it applies to more than California. So let's pull that up and take a look at it. I realize it's not the biggest, but you can get this on Facebook as well. So this is the question. Do you support a one-time tax of 5% on taxpayers? Okay, first of all, no one believes it's going to be one time. But nevertheless, this is the way they did it. And it's 5% of your assets valued over $1 billion. So it is winning 54-45 now. But here's the slice of Americana, which I think you see today. California Democrats supported 76-23. I'd be interested in who that 23 is because there's a lot of very rich Democrats in this state of California. And are they the ones, the limited number? That's 76%. 3/4 of Democrats favor this kind of wealth tax, right? Republicans, 82-18. Who the hell are the 18 thinking that's a good idea? But the more interesting thing, man, I mean, I would have guessed these numbers, right? A little bit concerned about the independents because even a majority of independents are in favor of this, 53-45. And if you take a look at the poll, 54-45, independents mirror the overall vote. And keep in mind, this only has to pass with a bare majority. Now, there is the urban centers versus the countryside. The urban centers, if you look at this poll, are all in favor of it. San Francisco Bay Area, 58-40. LA, 61-38. But the Central Valley, farmland, is against it, but not really significantly, only 56-44. Again, this is a slice of Americana. Men versus women. Men, barely against it. Women, decidedly for it. Look at the age gap. Under 44, 67-32 in favor. Older, 40-48. That's sort of a microcosm of where we are today in America. Now, this isn't just a California issue. If we go to the next slide, we had Elizabeth Warren out this week. And Elizabeth Warren wants to tax the AI industry to, quote, invest in people, right? This is the claim of the socialists. So we have to take care of people, not get them jobs, because they don't know how to do that. What they want to do is tax things. So, the more you tax something, the less of it you get. So What does she want to do? Well, she's in favor of a wealth tax as well. And she's not a small voice in the Democrat Party. Her, Bernie Sanders, AOC, she's out there. She's big deal. In fact, in 2020, she polled better in California than Kamala Harris. But this is the mentality. Oh, here is a thriving sector of the American economy. You need to tax it. That's where the Democrats are mentally. That is their party. Again, we were talking earlier about this. But the deal in California is this is a very large state, right? It has 50 plus electoral votes, although that's going to drop, maybe as low as in the 40s. But the point being here is that what passes in California sometimes goes nationally. And the fact that Californians want a billionaire's tax is certainly a warning, at least in my mind, to the rest of the country. And so we need to keep an eye on that. That's on the fall ballot. So is the governor's race. And so we'll have to see. We're going to have to see this next Tuesday, where Spencer Pratt is probably going to hit the runoff in LA with Karen Bass. And maybe we'll get Steve Hilton in a runoff against Javier Becerra. But who knows in California? Because Tom Steyer has spent $200 million of his own money claiming he cares about the poor. Well, in reality, his policies will put the poor out of business, meaning they would lose their jobs, just like the high minimum wage has hurt the poor. Tom Steyer's programs would hurt the poor. And Javier Becerra, he's a puppet, so who knows what would happen. Because remember, the California legislature is even more liberal than Gavin Newsom. Speaking of Gavin Newsom, there's a great video this past week from my friend Scott Besson about him, because Gavin Newsom is for, you saw that Trump wants to have this fund for those wronged by the J6 committee and others. It's a worthy cause. It should not be done by executive order. It should go through the legislative process, meaning Congress, the House, the Senate, and be signed, right? That's the right thing to do. But the issue's on the table now, and the man-child that is Gavin Newsom says he's all against this, saying we're going to tax this 100% in California. We have the right to do that. Meaning if someone got benefits from that and lived in California, California would tax them 100%. Now, that's unconstitutional, at least in my view. You can't tax people for political purposes. Keep in mind, the plan isn't even in place. We don't know the particulars. So the fact that Gavin is citing this is the reason they're doing this is going to be evidence in the case one day if, in fact, they try to tax those particular people. But Scott Besson had something to say about Gavin Newsom.
Thanks, sir. Governor Gavin Newsom has floated this idea of a 100% state tax on Californians who receive money from President Trump's anti-weaponization fund. Your response to the governor's call for 100% tax?
There's no cure for stupid.
I love Scott Besson. He says things with a smile. He's the smartest guy on the stage. I think he said that Newsom had a walnut-sized brain for his economic, quote, policies. But Scott just goes right to it, and he's not going to relent on Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom has been a disaster for California. He was a disaster for San Francisco. He would be a disaster on the national stage. So we definitely need to keep an eye on that. But I just thought it was a great line by Scott, because he just tells it like it is. He's not going to entertain the insanity. Like Tallarico. Are we really going to entertain someone who says in the U.S. Senate that there's 6 genders? Are we really going to entertain someone who says God's non-binary? Are we really going to entertain someone who says Jesus didn't talk about abortion, therefore it's okay? Is that the level of seriousness of the United States civilization today, that an absolute mental midget child would get in the US Senate and decide very important issues for the future of the country? I hope the answer to that is no. I hope people appreciate what the Democrats are doing today and where they want to go when they consider these midterms. Are you upset about gas prices? Are you worried about affordability? Are you worried about the national debt? And what the hell are Republicans doing about that? All good things. You should do that. You should voice your opinion on those things. But Tom Steyer's not the answer to anything in California. Tallarico's not the answer to anything anywhere. And the Democrats taking over the House is certainly not the answer either. I'm Tom Del Bacaro. That's been this week's show. I hope you will share this with your friends. Join me on Substack. You get the whole roster of shows on politicalvanguard.com. And we will see you next week. Thanks so much.